Welcome to the Daily Dawg podcast. This is GameWeek 3, and this is your Thursday podcast. This is Thursday, September 11th, and we are heading to the Tennessee game on Saturday. Well, I say we're heading, or we're leading up to the Tennessee game on Saturday in Knoxville, 3:30 p.m. Georgia will be on the road for its first road contest of the year, its first SEC contest of the year. It'll also be Tennessee's first SEC contest of the year. But I want to take a moment before we dig into today's topics to reflect on the fact that it is September 11th. It is the morning of September 11th as I record this podcast, and I distinctly remember 24 years ago waking up to begin my work day. I worked at home and turned on the TV and do the things that we do to get ready. Actually, I'm not even sure if I turned on the TV or something alerted me to turn it on. I don't remember. All I remember is once I turned on the TV in the living room and watched what was happening, I sat without moving for hours, just in one place. And my wife was there, and she came and sat beside me, and we just sat for hours and watched what was unfolding in the coverage. And we were horrified, and we should never forget what happened that day and how we were brutally attacked, and 3,000 innocent Americans were killed just on their way to work and starting their day on a beautiful fall day. It was beautiful weather, high sunny skies, crisp and clear. Here in the Atlanta area and up in New York, the weather was very similar, up and down the East Coast. And it's just something I will never forget. As a side note, if you've never been, I highly recommend that you take the time to go to the World Trade Centers, go to the 9/11 Museum in Lower Manhattan, and just fully appreciate the history of what's on display there and what happened. It's a difficult thing to endure. I've only done it once. I did it by myself on a business trip in New York, and I've had my family in New York a few times, and probably should take the time and the effort to have my family go through it, but it's really hard. But nonetheless, I just ask that you take a moment and reflect and think about it, and I'll be silent for a moment, and we can just have our silent moment here as we reflect on the people that we lost 24 years ago today. Okay, thank you. All right. Now, from that somber moment, I want to move on, and we're going to do a little more history. I promise we will continue to work on breaking down the game, and we'll get to predictions and what we think is going to happen. And for this game, unlike the two easy games we've dealt with so far, we're going to dig into kind of unit by unit, player by player on the key matchups and players, and we'll dig into it. And I'm sure there's plenty of that going on out there right now. But as a deep longtime Bulldog fan and one who wants to share my experiences with you and have this be part of a conversation where we just are sharing the love of Georgia football and all things UGA. As you know, I keep digging in a little bit to the history. We've dealt a little bit with the Georgia-Tennessee history. I've talked about that 9-game losing streak. And I feel like this is a moment where I want to share a little little bit more insight on my personal history with Tennessee. So we're gonna back up. I think I told you that my freshman year, Georgia went on the road and lost in a close game to Tennessee, and that ended up being the first of the 9 games of the losing streak. At the time, we had a 4-game winning streak going on. And so my personal history, and at some point as we go through the games this year and we get to our big rivals like Alabama and Auburn and Georgia Tech and and Florida, of course, we'll cover a little bit of the history. I like to dig back into that history and just give some context to where we are today and what's been going on. This is a glorious time in Georgia football. It's great to be a Georgia Bulldog. It's always great to be a Georgia Bulldog. But the last 10, 15 years or more have been particularly great to be a Georgia Bulldog, especially compared to our rivals. I made mention the other day that we are 18-6 since breaking the 9-game losing streak against Tennessee. I actually counted that up wrong. We're 19-6. So, go Dogs. I want reflect on that a little bit. Like I said, when I first came to the Tennessee rivalry, which was not a very deep rivalry, we had the famous game, as I referenced, the Bill Bates being plowed over the goal line by Herschel Walker, the first game of the 1980 season that really capped off what became these memorable moments that we all have seen highlights time and time again, and we've heard about and seen or were a part of, depending on how old you are. We've all heard about that game, and we know about that one. But that was part of a 4-game winning streak, and we played Tennessee very sporadically, like I said before. So coming into the Tennessee game my freshman year, which was the first time I got to really completely embrace the fandom and experience this rivalry, we were 10-8-2 against Tennessee. So we had a 2-game lead in the all-time series. And as you can tell from that, we'd only played 20 times. Now, I'm older than I wish I was in the world of stay young forever. Sometimes I'm embarrassed when not embarrassed really, but I mean, sometimes it's just shocking when I actually list out what I'm about to list out. For instance, I guess the easy way to jump to it is there's been 34 games that I have been a part of as a rabid Georgia fan starting from my freshman year. And that seems shocking to me. But what that means is those 34 games represent quite a bit more history than the 20 games that have been played in the entire history of the Georgia-Tennessee series. And at that point, you'd probably seen, 70, 80, 90 games had been played between most of our rivals that we played every year. So this was a lightly played series, but one that had some history. And you're talking about, as we talked about yesterday, two of the best teams, top 15 or so teams in the history of college football, teams with national titles and all-time wins and a lot of deep history. And so we sort of reflected on that. So you had these two programs, and now in 1989, we get to play them, and we're not going to play them again, from my point of view, we're not going to play them again until 1992, because that's when the conference split into the two divisions, and we expanded and brought in, it was, what am I thinking? It was South Carolina and... all of a sudden I've gone, I guess wasn't Texas A&M yet. Who was it? It was South Carolina and somebody else came in. Okay, well, embarrassingly, I lost track of that for a minute, but we'll come back to the minute. Long story short is that the conference expanded in 1992, and now we had two divisions, the East and the West, and that's when we began playing Tennessee every year. But we did play them as part of a home and away series that happened periodically in 1989. And we had played them in Athens in 88, just before I arrived on campus, so in 89, and we'd won that game. So in 89, I watched on TV with other Dawg fans, freshmen in the dorm, piled around the TV, and we watched as we lost a close game, 17-13. I had no idea at the time that would be the first of 9 consecutive losses, so while I was definitely sad and frustrated that we lost a game to another top SEC team, I didn't think of it as a harbinger of long-standing evil about to befall us. But so what I want to do is take a look at a couple of these games and give you some of the history there. So at this point, we were 10-8-2, and then now we lost that 1989 game, and now we're 10-9-2. So still only had played 21 games in the history of the Tennessee-Georgia rivalry, and Georgia still has a 1-game lead at this point in the all-time series. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. Historically great team. We lost this game my freshman year, but hey, we still have a 1-game lead in the series, one of many teams with Alabama and LSU being 2 exceptions, but looking around the SEC, otherwise we have either a tied or lead record, and all these other teams that we're rivals with, and all these other rivals that we played every year back at that time, like Clemson and South Carolina, before they joined the SEC, and Clemson we still played every year. So we come to the 92 game, and this is Vince Dooley had, of course, retired at the end of the 88 season, much to my deep disappointment, because then we picked up the coach Ray Goff, which I did not know at the time. I mean, listen, Ray Goff is a great Bulldog. He won an SEC championship as a player, was a team captain. He's always been loyal and true to Georgia, and I admire the fact that I don't know how valuable he would have been as a coach, but his life reflected how I would have felt. He was the team captain, won an SEC championship, played for Vince Dooley, married a cheerleader, and rose up through the ranks of grad assistants and coaching at Vince Dooley's side to take over the team as the head coach. And when his 7-year tenure ended and didn't go well, he quit coaching. And that was it. He did not go off and get another job and work anywhere else. He's remained around Athens, and he's been a loyal Bulldog, and he's not, I'm sure he probably resented the firing and the way it went, but he has always been true to Georgia and a good guy, and he's represented Georgia well. So I feel bad about the way his tenure went back in those days. And this will really, tell you, some of your younger fans, will really make me sound old. Although you still see them a little bit once in a while. They still fly banners on behind planes over the stadium. But they flew banners over the stadium all game day, all during the tailgate and all during the game back in that time frame in the 80s. And the propeller planes would fly by with the banners on, and they were ads for where to eat after the game and various Athens and Atlanta things. And it was a great way to have a captive audience, and people would look up in the sky and see the banners. And during political season, you would see, election time, you would see, banners promoting various candidates and different things. And one of the things I'll never forget as the Ray Goff tenure began to go downhill was that somebody had hired a plane to grab a banner and fly over the stadium, encouraging Vince Dooley, who was the athletic director still, to do what needed to be done and move on from Ray Goff, with the very ugly sign flying behind the plane up in the high skies above Sanford Stadium. It said, "Fire Ray Goof." So I guess that was their... they didn't have social media. They couldn't lash out on X or Instagram or some other forum, so they hired a banner, flew it over the plane. Hired a plane with a banner, flew it over the stadium, and thought they were being clever, I guess, with the Fire Ray Goof. I always felt bad about that, and it still sticks in my mind. It just seems like an ugly way to deal with a situation nobody likes. Nobody wants to see your team struggle and the coach not get it done. And when it's time to move on, it can be painful, but not sure we needed that. So anyway, back to the 92 game. So 92 is the peak of the Ray Goff era. He had struggled, went 5-6, I think, in his first year, 6-6 in his first year. And that was in 1990. 91, though, was a rebound year. They went 9-3, finished number 17 in the polls, and won the Poulin Weed Eater Independence Bowl. Woohoo! So 92 comes along, and in the 93 season, Eric Zier had emerged. And, up to this point, Georgia has largely been a team that always has a quarterback who's a team captain, but he knows what his job is, which is to not make mistakes, hand the ball off, feed the great stable of running backs that Georgia always has, and make sure that you don't do anything stupid. And once in a while, maybe throw a pass. Even when you think of the legendary pass to Lindsey Scott in the 1980 season, "Run, Lindsey, run." The pass traveled about 8 yards in the air, and then Lindsey outran the defense the rest of the way for the touchdown. And if you go back and you look at that time, I'm pretty sure that Buck Bellew had maybe 100 and something yards at the as we're closing in on towards the end of the game. Maybe not even that at that point in the game. And that's just, of course, you had Herschel Walker then, right? So you look at that and you say, well, what do? You give the ball to Herschel Walker. And we did. Most games, Herschel Walker got the ball 30, 40 times. But that was not exclusive to the Herschel Walker era. That brand of football was still going on when I got to campus. And it was largely 2-3 running backs, hand off the ball, an occasional pass to keep the defense honest. And of course, if it was 3rd and long, then maybe we try a pass. And that wasn't unusual. That was kind of typical for the state of college football. But there were some people beginning to move into the new era of high-powered offenses. And Eric Zier was the first quarterback, highly touted quarterback recruit that Georgia was able to bring to campus, who had showed the skills in high school to be a passing quarterback, a primary passing quarterback, not just handing the ball off. And we also were fortunate to recruit and bring to campus a fantastic running back in Garrison Hurst. And then we had some other good players like the wide receiver Andre Hastings and a number of other people who came together, plus some great offensive linemen, defensive linemen. Everything came together to have a really tremendous team, a potential title contending team in 1992. And so that 92 season got underway, and Georgia had won its first 3 or 4 games and then came to the Tennessee game. And so the Tennessee game was at home in Athens, and Georgia had what turned out to be an epically just frustrating and unbelievably difficult game in that game, because we ran the ball up and down the field on Tennessee. Eric Zeier was amazing. He threw, at that time, you rarely saw a college quarterback. I mean, it was a big day when college quarterbacks got over 200 yards. Zeier had 350 plus yards in the game, was chucking the ball all over the place. Everybody around him, though, was having trouble holding on to the ball. In this game, Georgia managed to well, I guess where I was trying to go with this is I'm getting a little deep in the history, but the long story short, what began to happen in that game was, yes, it was the 92 game. So what ended up happening in that game was everybody was having a hard time holding on to the ball, and Georgia would fumble the ball 7 times during the game and lose 4 of them. So they actually recovered 3 but lost 4. And so constantly moving the ball up and down the field, but constantly just being the enemy of their own destruction, or just the agent of their own destruction, their own enemy. And Garrison Hurst, the fantastic running back, had a great game. He had 20 carries for 161 yards and 3 touchdowns. He broke off a 64-yarder. So with all of this offense from Zeier and Hurst, we still had a shot and still should have won the game. In fact, they ended up with a 30 to 27 lead late in the game. So they took the lead. They had been down 27-17, but a pair of touchdowns got us to, I don't remember how it ended up at 30 instead of 31, but a pair of touchdowns got us to a 30. I don't think it was just field goals. I'm not 100% sure about that. Nonetheless, they came back towards the end of the game to get the 2 touchdowns. I'm pretty sure it was the 2 touchdowns. Take the 30 to 27 lead. And now you have about 5 or 6 minutes to play. And so you just have to try to play defense, or, limit Tennessee to maybe a field goal to tie up the game and see if you have a chance to come back and win it. So Heath Shuler was the quarterback for Tennessee back then. And if the name sounds familiar, you might have known him as a longtime Colorado Rocky first baseman. Heath Shuler would be the agent of our destruction here. He would lead the Tennessee team to win this game, and he did not even have the decency to go on and play pro football. He decided to play baseball instead. So, but he, I take that back. Actually, I'm thinking of Todd Helton, who did play at Tennessee. So, all right, now I'm really fumbling over history. This is the downside of digging into history. So I take that back. Heath Shuler, I don't remember what Heath Shuler did. He might have had a brief moment in the pros. Nonetheless, he didn't go on to be significant and a great, like Tom Brady quarterback, which, I guess I feel like if you're going to beat us, I want you to go on to be like one of the great players of all time. And that has happened. I mean, Florida's had some great players, Tebow eras, stuff like that. You can look back and say, well, we lost to those teams with Tim Tebow. At least he was, Heisman Trophy winner, greatest, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in college football, right? Heath Shuler was a good player, don't get me wrong, but Eric Zeier definitely was a better passing quarterback in that game. Heath Shuler, I do think, was a multi-sport star, and football was not his only thing necessarily. I just don't remember all the details there, but I definitely remember thinking that we had the better quarterback, and he definitely was putting up the bigger game. And yet somehow Heath Shuler, with a lot less yardage, somehow just kept breaking off runs. And he was not known as a running quarterback. I mean, this was not a guy who necessarily was like, going to run for 150 yards a game and pass for 150 yards a game. But he had like a 44-yarder somewhere in the game. But the worst injury of the whole thing is it came down to they were driving. They got to our side of the field around the 50, 34, something like that. We were still up 30-27. And we pushed them all the way to the do or die 4th down play. And it's not 4th and 2 or 4th and 1 or even 4th and 5. Excuse me. It's 4th and 14. Okay. So all we have to do is stop 4th and 14. We're at home. The crowd's going crazy. I'm there in the stands. I'm in the student section. I'm watching, and they're going towards Sanford Bridge. So they're going away from us, which I remember being particularly horrible in this moment because Schuler drops back on the play. He's truly trying to pass because he doesn't have a belief that he's going to run for 14 yards. So the play is for a pass play. And he looks and he looks and he has time and he's being forced out. And he finally gets forced out of the pocket and he's got no options. The defense is doing its job. The crowd's going crazy. He breaks free to the outside. And then somehow he weaves, bobs, and dives his way through the Georgia defense for 15 yards on 4th and 14 and lands just at the first down, which already has them in field goal range now. Which is, so I guess, I don't remember where they were. I said they were about the 34, but they must have been just outside that, around the 50 to 40 yard line. But they were on the other side of the field going towards Sanford Bridge. I remember watching excruciatingly as he busted through and weaved and bobbed and then finally was tackled. And as you know, if you're in the stadium watching, especially from an angle like that, he's going away from me, I'm just waiting for the spot, right? Like all I'm hoping is, okay, we tackled him. We got him down. Surely he did not gain 14 yards. And he gains 14 yards. They get the first down. They're already in field goal range. So now they've got a pretty easy field goal to just tie the game. But of course, no, they're going to go ahead and punch it in. They're going to get down to the 2-yard line and dive into the end zone with about 20 or about 50 seconds to play and take the lead, going up 34, 30. Oh, I guess it was 31. I have to go back and look. Let me see. But nonetheless, they take the lead. Yeah, I think I said before it was we made it 27 to it was 27-30. No, we got to 31. So it was 31-27. So now they're up 34, 31, and maybe we can tie this thing up with a field goal. They left us about 50 seconds, and Zaire throws a pass, and I think we get about 30 or 40 yards on the first play. There's not much time, but we're already at midfield or across midfield and, a play or two away from maybe a game-tying field goal. And, of course, we fumble the ball again. The 7th time in the game and the 4th time we lose it, and the game excruciatingly ends. So that that game was just one that just always stuck in my mind, and it was just raw pain. Just hard to imagine. And it only got worse as the season went because we would go on to lose to Florida as well. So that was terrible. Again, this was the first year of the SEC East. So we have a chance to win the East. And we actually officially in the record books for 1992 are listed as SEC co-champions or SEC East co-champions. But we lost to Florida, who also finished 6-2 in the conference. We finished 6-2 in conference. Again, Heath Schuler and Tennessee didn't even bother to win the conference. They went 5-3, so they're not a factor. So yes, we could have won the Florida game and still played for the East in the first ever SEC championship game. But we didn't because we lost to Florida. But I still think of the pain of the Tennessee game and saying, look, even if we'd lost to Florida, had we not lost the Tennessee game, a game that we had won, and all we had to do was stop 4th and 14 with less than a minute to go or about a minute to go, right? If we could have just stopped that play, even having lost to Florida, we still, because they ended up taking 2 losses on the year, we still would have represented at 7-1 the SEC and the SEC championship game. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this would have led to a national championship, although this certainly, this was a team that looked like they could have and should have competed for the national championship, and this was the frustration. This was the sort of the agony of the Georgia fan at this time, is we had the talent. We were in the top 10 for much of the season. We finished the season ranked number 8th, but we never were really a factor or seriously a part of the national title discussion because first we lost to Tennessee, 4th or 5th game of the year. Then we go on in a win streak, and then we get to the Florida game, and we lose that again. That knocks us back out. If we could have won that game, sure, we would have leapt back into the national title discussion of teams that are making their way towards a possible national title. Again, in this era, this is the bowl era where you're going to get matched up in different bowl games, and teams are going to, number 1 might be playing number 8 in a bowl game, and number 2 might be playing number 10 in a different bowl game, and it's all going to be voted on and whatnot, right? But nonetheless, you have to win the games and be in that top 5 or so going into the end of the season to have a chance. And this is where we could have and would have been, but we were not, because first and foremost, we lost a game to what at the time struck me as an inferior Tennessee team. They were an inferior team. They did not finish the season as highly ranked as we did, and they did not really compete for the SEC East. Had we won the East, we would have faced Alabama. Alabama was the national champion this year. Gene Stallings was the coach, and they were a little bit of an underdog. They went into it was in the Sugar Bowl. They did get matched up against Miami because Miami didn't have a straight bowl tie-in. The SEC had the Sugar Bowl tie-in, and so Miami was number 1 in the country, and they were undefeated, and they had held the top spot. Alabama didn't quite have as much cachet, if you can believe it, at that point, and so they were number 2, and most people thought Miami would take this title. And Miami was in an era where they were in the process of, I don't remember exactly where they were. I think they'd won the title in 1989. So here's a couple seasons later. They won 5 championships in a relatively short period of time in the 80s and 90s, national championships. So Miami was a dominant team, and Alabama had been off for a while, but was making a comeback here under Gene Stallings. And they went into that game, and Alabama just killed them. There was something like 34 to 13, I think, was the final score. And there was a play that was one of the most amazing plays I've ever seen in college football that changed the game. Miami got a breakaway, either a running back or a wide receiver caught a pass, whichever, but they were streaking down the field, and Alabama had a defensive back. I think his name was Antonio Langham, something like that. He raced up behind the Miami player and caught him from behind and stripped the ball from him and took the ball away. So the Miami guy fumbled the ball, and he picked up the ball and ran back the other way. Now, I don't think he scored, but I mean, it was just like, it looked like Miami was going to score this long touchdown and begin part of what everybody thought was going to be a beatdown of underdog Alabama. And this defensive back just catches this guy and takes the ball away from him. And Alabama goes the other way and scores a touchdown ultimately, and it just becomes part of a beatdown. So that Alabama team beat Florida in the SEC championship game 28-21. So Florida played them tough, but again, I don't know that there's any reason to believe that we would have necessarily won that game, but it certainly would have taken us to a higher level of national prominence, and it would have been a whole different track for Ray Goff's tenure, because this would be the high watermark of his tenure, this 10-2 season and a final number 8 ranking, but generally just outside of the national championship and really elite discussion. And as a Georgia fan, that was my angst at the time. That seemed to be where we lived for a long time, on the edge of greatness, but not great. A couple of years later, we would go to Tennessee and play them again, 1995 season. Now we've lost a few in a row, and what would end up being the 5th loss in a row to Tennessee. Robert Edwards, some of you might remember, had emerged and became just an unbelievable running back for Georgia. He had been a defensive back, safety, and then he was converted to running back. And when he first converted to running back, it was early in the season, and I think it was the second game of the year. Yeah, it was the second game of the year in 1995. We went to play Tennessee, so the whole idea of Edwards taking over running back was kind of new. He busts out in the game, and in the first quarter of the game, he has 15 carries for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. And you're thinking, if you're a Georgia fan at this time, this is amazing. This is like one of the great running back performances of all time. It's only half a game. He's already 15 carries, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns. We're going to beat Tennessee on the road, and we're going to break this losing streak. And he goes on to get hurt in the game. I don't remember if he was out for the rest of the season or how it all came together, but he gets hurt for the game. He has to leave after just the 15 carries. The team soldiers on and does a great job and gets us in a position where it's 27-all late in the game. They drive for the potential game-winning field goal, miss it, and Tennessee takes the ball out near midfield after the long field goal attempt. They get a few plays going the other way. They get the long field goal, win the game 30-27. And again, fifth game. Now it's our 5th loss in a row, heartbreaking fashion. You saw this amazing emergence of Robert Edwards come forward as this potential great running back, and he has this amazing game, and it looks like we're going to break or at least be really competitive and break this losing streak. And even without him, the team, from what he propelled them to at the beginning of the game, goes on to put themselves in a position to potentially win the game, but heartbreakingly, we fall short yet again. So that was our 5th straight loss at that time. So I'm going to leap forward to the 2004 game when talking about these games. And you'd say, well, why would you do that? And because I want to end on a high note, which is to say that I'm saving one of the great fun moments, one of my favorite moments as a Georgia fan of all time, which was actually the 2003 game. So I'm going to jump over that for a minute. We'll come back to that so we can end this segment with greatness, not woe and agony, right? But the woe and agony is, this helps you, for those of you who haven't experienced all of these games or don't remember them one by one quite like I do, or quite like I have. As you can tell, I've internalized these all along the way, and they've all been part of the formative experience to where I am now, and it's all part of the release of just glory, glory, as the song plays, watching us win those back-to-back national championships, watching us these last 10 years just take over the SEC, not just the SEC East as long as it lived, but the SEC itself, and become the dominant team in the SEC. A thing that I thought we always could be, and we were tantalizingly close, like those moments in 1992, maybe even 1995. If Robert Edwards had stayed healthy, he would come back in 1997 and have a 4-touchdown game and lead Georgia to a 37-17 victory over Florida, breaking our long losing streak against them, and just a resounding beatdown in a game where we were a heavy underdog. And I will never forget watching how upset and frustrated and ultimately just beaten Steve Spurrier looked that day. So, Robert Edwards' emergence, but injury in that 1995 game was another moment where it was close. And then another moment where Tennessee cost us was the 2004 game. So in 2002, Mark Richt had gotten us to the SEC championship game. We'd lost just the Florida game that year. We went to the SEC championship game. We dominated and destroyed Arkansas in the game, and we rose up to finish number 3 in the rankings that season because of the loss to Florida, just missing out on being a part of the national title discussion between, I think it was then, Miami and Ohio State that season, both of whom went to the bowl game undefeated. So I don't think we were gypped. We needed to have won the Florida game. We were probably that season, when you looked at how everything played out, clearly one of the best teams in the country. We certainly had the talent, but again, that was one of those moments where we were tantalizingly close at this time to the mountaintop, not just prominence. I mean, we certainly achieved prominence. You finished number 3, you win the Sugar Bowl, you beat down Florida State, you win the SEC championship, you get to that game for the first time, and win your first SEC championship in 20 years. Those were all great moments, and I think we all reveled in that. But in the big picture, it was another moment where we were just short of ultimate greatness, the kind of mountaintop we've been able to get to in recent years, right? So 2000, that's 2002. 2003, you might remember, we win the SEC East again. We go back to the SEC championship game, so we're back to back after waiting 20 years to get there. Or actually, I say 20 years to get there. It was 20 years to get to an SEC championship again. It was only 10 years to get there because the first SEC championship game was in 1992, and we got there and won it in 2002. So we were back again in 2003, and it did not go as well in 2003. That was LSU's year. They beat us down and won the SEC championship, and then they went on to win the national championship under Nick Saban. So, but in the 2004 season, we come in. We are the back-to-back SEC East champions, and we have a 17-game home winning streak as Tennessee comes to town, and we are number 3 in the country, and we're back in the elite position of potentially being a national title contender. Again, a team that just missed the previous 2 years. But now we're back, and this time we get a crack at Nick Saban again. In the 4th game of the season, LSU comes to town and is, like, oh, can Georgia beat LSU? Can Georgia beat Nick Saban? And we go out on the field and have one of the greatest days in Sanford Stadium I ever remember seeing. We beat them 45. We beat LSU 45-16, and Nick Saban was famous in that era at LSU for cranking out NFL-worthy defensive backs, and of course he made his name initially as a defensive coach and particularly defensive backfield. So we went out and in that game and threw. David Green was our quarterback then, and he went out there and threw touchdowns. I think 4 touchdowns, all over like 20-something. I mean, just every time we got anywhere near the end zone, he threw like a fade pattern that was caught over the defensive back in the end zone for touchdowns. We just attacked right at them early and often. I think he had a 4 or 5 touchdown game, was tied or was a record for for Georgia touchdown passing game. Anyway, it was just a fabulous game. We started off early and often just scoring points and beating them down, and the final score was 45-16, and it was glorious. So we're the number 3 team in the nation a week later. We really look like a title contender. LSU was a ranked team, was a defending national champion, and we've beaten them and Nick Saban. And so Tennessee, who's a good team this year in 2004. Excuse me. Tennessee is a good team. They're ranked. They're like number 17 coming into the game. But we're a heavy favorite and 17-game home winning streak and just destroyed LSU in the hunt for national championship. People are really looking, this is our 3rd year, so we're really on the ascendancy here, right? And this looks like a chance to take over dominance in the conference. And Tennessee comes to town, and they jump out to a 10-0 lead in the first quarter on a series of mistakes and just not playing that great. They're leading 13-7 at the half. It's one of these games where it's like, well, we're trailing, but you feel like we're the better team and we should be able to pull this out. We're never able to get on top. Ultimately, they build the lead again a little bit in the second half, get up to a 19-7 lead. We get a late touchdown to pull it to within 19-14 and maybe get the ball back with a chance to win. It falls short. Eric Ainge was the quarterback for Tennessee, and so they come into Sanford Stadium and they snap our 17-game winning streak. They end up winning the SEC East off of the strength of this game, even though they go on to have a somewhat inferior year to us. We have a better overall year in 2004. But they had the tiebreaker. They go to the SEC championship game. In fact, the only other game we lost that season, we go 10-2. The only other game we lost was to Auburn, who did actually beat us pretty thoroughly, 24-6. Auburn was a dominant team that year. And but we'd had another crack at them. We'd had the first ever Auburn, Georgia, and I think maybe the first ever rematch of a regular season game in the SEC championship had we not lost to Tennessee. We would have gotten a rematch as a one-loss team, and as a one-loss team, if we won the SEC championship, beat Auburn, we would have propelled us into, the national title discussion again. But we didn't get that chance. We were relegated to a good bowl game and a nice 10-2 season. And Tennessee went there and they lost Auburn, and Auburn won the SEC championship because, they got to play an inferior Tennessee game. So these are moments of agony, that Tennessee inflicted on me. And, they built, from my personal fan perspective, again, when I was a freshman, we had this 10-8-2 record. So we had a winning record against one of the great SEC teams, one of the great, college football teams of all time. So it's part of our, our history and our glory that, hey, they're great, but we're better. We go on this 9-game losing streak. And even after we snap the 9-game losing streak, there's some back and forth. It takes a while because after the 9-game losing streak, we're 10-17-2. We're 7 games under 500 against Tennessee. So, at that time, I remember thinking probably in my lifetime, we won't get back. I mean, when you win 2, lose 1, win 3, lose 2, that's how these series tend to go. Again, you look at where the series was in the first 80 years of Georgia-Tennessee football. They'd only played the 20 times, but it's a 10-8-2 record back and forth. Auburn series was close and tied, and that's what these series tend to look like. So I had no idea we would end up going 19-6 in the next 25 games and take a fairly commanding, at this point, 29 to 23 and 2 tie lead in the series. So we now have a 6-game advantage in the series, and that's great. So I apologize. I'm having so much trouble suddenly with dry throat. I am doing this podcast fairly close to the one from yesterday, so I'm running a little short on voice maybe, and I apologize about that. So I'm going to wrap up the history of Tennessee with saying one of the greatest moments of my UGA fandom was the 2003 game. In this game, this was actually going to be our 4th win in a row against Tennessee. And so Jim Donnan had righted the ship. This is where we, first thought Jim Donnan might be the answer, because he took over and he righted the ship. Quincy Carter at quarterback. They beat Tennessee in the 2000 season, breaking the 9-game losing streak. And I still don't know whether I'm embarrassed about this or how this goes, but the fans, I mentioned this the other day in the podcast, but fans were so elated. And so, again, it's not just me. You may be listening to all this and thinking, he's crazy. I mean, how does he fixate on this about just Tennessee? Okay, 9-game losing streak. Well, the only time in Sanford Stadium history, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure the only time in Sanford Stadium history that Georgia fans have stormed the field, and we did this crashing over and beating up and not destroying, but doing severe damage to our own beloved hedges. Fans stormed the field after beating Tennessee 21-10, and that game wasn't close. I mean, it's like we didn't just score at the end and win. I mean, we were winning the whole game, and but fans still, the tension of that 9-game. So in other words, 90,000 people shared with me the tension of having this horrible losing streak and the release of that, even though they knew it wasn't like this big epic, oh my gosh, look what happened at the last. I mean, we won this game thoroughly throughout the game, held them off, made sure nothing happened, won the game 21-10. Quincy Carter at quarterback, Jim Donnan in his second season, I think, or I don't remember for sure right now, but nonetheless, won the game. Fans stormed the field. Only time that's happened in Sanford Stadium. A little embarrassing, but maybe a good moment. And it just shows you the elation and how everybody shared in the pain of this losing streak. So that would be the first of 4 straight wins, which of course didn't get us back to even yet in the series. But we would win 4 straight. And the 4th straight win was the game in Knoxville in 2003. Now, this is the only time I have been to Knoxville, and one of my best friends and longtime dog fans, fellow bulldog at the in school at the same time as me, and a dedicated Daily Dog podcast listener. So I'm sure he'll appreciate this story. He was living and working in Tennessee at the time and worked with a company that had were a bunch of Tennessee fans, but they had a luxury box. So they had one of those corporate boxes at Neyland Stadium. And so we got the invite, my wife and I, to travel up and come to the game at Tennessee if we could. And be in the luxury box. So this was an exciting thing. I'd never been to Knoxville. So a few observations. I saw somebody talking about, some of the people talking about this game coming up and how they'd been there before. Some of the players, a lot of young players on our team haven't been there before. This will be their first game there. But they talk about how it's sort of like the Colosseum, and it is. If you think about what the Colosseum in Rome looks like, and this is giving Neyland Stadium more credit than I really want to give it, but it is Colosseum-like in terms of it just rises up out of the ground, and it's got that shape because it's very rounded. And what it actually is it's the smallest, I've described it before, it's the smallest big stadium I've ever seen. Okay, they somehow get 100,000 people plus in this stadium, but it physically clearly seems to be smaller than Sanford Stadium, which holds 93,000 people. So, and it feels that way from the inside, and it's oddly vertical. So one of the things they do is, of course, Sanford Stadium is not completely bowled in, right? We have left the historic opening at Sanford Bridge, so you can see in from the bridge. A lot of people, if you're an old-time Georgia fan, I mean, really, beyond my years, when the other end zone was open, and basically Sanford Stadium was just a two-sided stadium, you could see the railroad tracks, and there used to be the track game. So people would sit out on the railroad tracks and watch the game on the trestle and the tracks that are elevated behind the stadium in front of the graveyard. And that was sort of a famous, and I don't know, honestly, I'd have to look it up. I'll try to see if I can find out. I don't know if that has anything to do with the, who's that coming down the track song, because of the tracks that run right behind the stadium that you used to be able to see. You don't think about them now because that end of the stadium has been completely bowled in since the 80s. But and I've seen pictures, so again, this is before my time, but I've seen pictures when it was open, and I've seen pictures of people hanging out on the tracks and watching from the hill and the tracks back then. And so there was a lot of controversy actually when they decided to bowl in that end, because that was something of a tradition. But bowing to tradition, we've never bowled in the other end, because we do also revere the ability to drive or walk down Sanford Drive and look into the stadium, which I think is beautiful and iconic because of the way the stadium sits in the center of campus, in the bottom of the hill there above Tanyard Creek. And it's just fantastic, and it's one of the best settings in all of college football. And I think it's wonderful that we have sacrificed massive seating, which is great, okay, to have that opening that we keep and protect so that we can all look in the stadium whenever we're there and as the students walk by every day. And I enjoyed that every day I was on campus, and I still enjoy it when I go and visit. And I stop there at the bridge and take a picture just about every time. So nonetheless, the point being is that if we bowled that in, if we closed in that and wrapped it around, then Sanford Stadium could probably hold about 115,000 people. I think is probably, you'd probably get another 10 or 15,000 people, 10 or 12,000 people in that section if you bowled in the rest of the top of that and enclosed it. Even with that, Sanford Stadium would be wider and bigger than Neyland Stadium. It's just very vertical, and it's kind of an erector set of a stadium, Neyland Stadium. It's metal on the outside. Sanford Stadium is concrete. I mean, the lower half of it is still built into the hills, the original hills, right? So the part that you can see that's exposed of Sanford Stadium is all concrete and very attractive. And a lot of other stadiums around the league, like Auburn Stadium and Tennessee Stadium, are largely on flatter pieces of land where the entire stadium from the ground level up is above the ground. So it gives it that Colosseum-like appearance when you walk up to it from the river or any place really, but because it is right on the river, because it just rises up out of the ground and it's rounded around all the sides. And because it's not as big around, you really see the roundness of it in the height. So it gives it that Colosseum look. Now, Again, Coliseum, not in the grandeur and the beauty of the Coliseum, mind you, because like I said, it's kind of like a beige erector set from the outside, which is kind of ugly, actually, but impressive. Ugly and impressive all at the same time. And then on the inside, it's just as weird. It's piecemealed in that different parts of it were added at different times. And they did a pretty good job of making it kind of a complete, not oval, but kind of oval shape, like, right? But it has different sections. Like the upper deck in one end zone is different than the upper deck in the other. There's a cover on one end and not on the other. And inside you can see, I mean, you can, before all the people fill in and when the stadium's empty, or if you get there early and watch the people fill in, you can visually easily tell, like, okay, this section was a section, and then they added that section, and then this section was a section. You can just see where it was pieced together. Okay. On TV, once it's, and I think they're doing the checkerboard thing again or something in the stands, right? The road crew orange and checker white look. But nonetheless, anyway, when all the stands, regardless of what they're wearing, or even if they're not wearing, like the overall guys with no, one strap and no shirt. Anyway, regardless of what they're wearing or not wearing, when they fill in, you can't see all the bits and pieces of how the stadium is built together. But it is kind of impressive in some sort of a way. I mean, when you get in there, it is the smallest space I could ever imagine. And by contrast, I've been to Alabama since they've expanded to 101,000, been to some of these other big stadiums. Again, much more open, much bigger feeling. Tennessee just totally closed in. And it helps give them that home field advantage, though, too, because the people are just, it's very vertical. The stands are very close, even as the upper decks are very close, much closer to the field than, say, Sanford Stadium, which is much wider, has this long, wide lower deck that kind of sweeps up and back. And so by the time you're in the upper deck in Sanford Stadium, you're really far away from the stadium. I mean, not only are you vertically high, but you're also like 40 yards back from the sideline, so, or maybe more. So not at Neyland Stadium. At Neyland Stadium, even in the upper deck, you are hanging over the football field, it feels like. And so getting bound with the story. So the luxury suites, a little bit like Sanford, we've added our luxury suites, to the top of the south side stands. And originally it was just a box. Well, they built boxes on top of the stadium, basically. So literally, you have the whole rest of the stadium and the upper deck, like ours. We have our third, or our highest deck actually is pretty much equal on the north side stands as the luxury boxes on the south side. Well, their luxury boxes are essentially tacked on top of the stadium. And again, very vertical. And the windows actually, and the ones we were in, actually are reverse angled. So in other words, the floor, the window is closer in at the foot than it is at the ceiling. It slopes out going up towards the ceiling. And so inside the luxury box, it was like 3 levels. So it's sort of like stadium seating inside there. But the feeling when you sit in, so initially I was sitting in maybe the second or third level of the little riser seats inside the luxury box when we got there. And the windows lean forward, and the whole thing is sitting up on top of the roof of the stadium, basically, and kind of feels like you're just leaning out over the stadium and looking down at the field. It's like a helicopter view of the field. And it was actually a little bit unnerving. And because the whole thing is just a big giant erector set metal thing, it also, unlike Sanford Stadium, which is concrete and built into the earth, it also moves. It's one of those stadiums that as the fans jump up and down and get really excited and you can feel vibration. You can feel a sense. So it's a little unsettling. You're on top of the roof. The crowd is going wild. You're sitting there in this sloped window thing, kind of leaning forward, it feels like, out over the field. And the whole thing is kind of shaking and vibrating and moving a little bit. And it's just a tad terrifying. But it was an interesting view. And it was certainly nice I think it was a little bit of the weather, maybe a little bit of rain, or I don't remember the exact temperature and all that, but it seemed like it was a good day to be inside for whatever reason during this game. So back to the game. What happened? So this game, I had as much fun as I've ever had in person at an away game because Georgia came in, again, having won 3 in a row against Tennessee and having just won the SEC championship the year before, finishing number 3, beating Florida State in the Sugar Bowl, all that as we just discussed, the 2002 season. So 2003, here we are in the ascendancy. We go to Tennessee, and we're ranked number 6, and they're ranked number 10. So this is another key matchup. And we get there, and this is one of those games that starts out a little frustrating. We're dominating the game in the first half, but we're not scoring. We settle for a couple field goals. We get 1 touchdown, but we're dominating the game. Tennessee hasn't moved the ball except for they get 1 bomb. They get a 2-play drive with a 90-yard busted play for a touchdown. Right. So here we are just dominating the game, but we're only up 13-0, and then they get a bomb. Or maybe it wasn't even when we were up 13-0. We might have just been up 10-0, and then I think it was. And then they get this bomb, and now it's 10-7. And so we march down the field again, and you think, okay, let's put the ball in the end zone. No, we settle for another field goal. So now it's 13-7. So it's closing in on the half, and Tennessee gets the ball for the last possession of the half. And we've dominated this game, but we're only up 13-7. And Tennessee gets the ball, and they're driving towards our end zone. And sure enough, they get all the way down to the 2-yard line. And we're getting down to the last play or 2 of the half. This is going to be a moment just like the game against Austin Peay here, where we're trying to score, except the stakes are much higher right before the half. They've got the ball, and it looks like they're going to punch it in basically on the last play of the half. And for all of our dominance and for having been won 3 in a row and being the defending SEC champion, here we are yet again at Tennessee, and we're about to go down at the half 14-13. And, and then you're thinking, geez, this is terrible, right? And here I am with all these gloating, Tennessee fans in a luxury box. And there's good and bad being in a luxury box. The good is it's quiet and you have food and clean bathrooms. The good can also be that you don't have to sit around a bunch of screaming crazy fans and you can't hear yourself think outside in the main part of the stadium. On the other hand, it's very personal. So when you're losing, the people in this nice quiet environment, office building like environment, are like, hey, look, looks like for you guys are really, and that's what I'm hearing. All the Tennessee fans in the box, you guys have just dominated this half, but looks like you might be down the half. Like, okay. Well, Sean Jones, who was a great safety for Georgia in that 2003-2004 seasons, Sean Jones ends up. I don't think he caused it, or I don't remember, but they go for this rushing touchdown. It's going to be the last play, so they can run the ball. They don't have to throw it. There's not enough time. It's either 4th down or there's only a couple seconds left on the clock. So they're going to run the ball in. They go to run the ball in, and there's a fumble. I think it was on the pitch maybe or something, but the ball is bouncing around at about the 7-yard line. I mean, they were down to like the 2 or 3, and somehow the ball pops out. It's bouncing around the 7-yard line. Sean Jones busts out of a pack of people, scoops up the ball, in kind of all in one motion, and runs the length of the field the other way as the clock expired for a touchdown. So Tennessee goes from elation, and fans are already cheering. This is one of those moments where fans, as the ball's being snapped, they're like cheering that they're scoring, like here we go, yeah! And the ball's on the ground. Sean Jones picks it up, runs the other way. A couple of Tennessee guys try to chase him down to no avail. He picks up the ball, scoops, and scores the other way for a 92 or 93-yard fumble return for touchdown. We kick the extra point. We go up 20-7. Tennessee comes out in the second half like limp bacon, and they don't do anything, and we go on to dominate the game, and we win 41-14. And that 14, that 7 points came with like in the final couple minutes, like it was 41-7, and we just kept pouring it on, and finally there was a late, touchdown from the backups, and even at the half, I remember I have never enjoyed a halftime, I think, more than that play, and just the elation of the change of the moment of the game where it went from like we've dominated the game, but now we're going to be losing at the half, and maybe we're going to go on to lose this game, and the Tennessee fans are all like, wow, this is great, to scoop and score the other way. Now all of a sudden the score looks like what the game has been. We've been dominating the whole time, and here we are up 20-7. We get the ball to start second half. We just crush them. Their will is beaten. And my wife and I get to go. So it's when you leave the luxury box. They had some food and drinks in the luxury box, but the luxury box spills out into a big Tennessee lounge area where all the Tennessee fans are congregating, and they have food and a buffet, and clean restrooms and a big air conditioned sort of it's like a hotel lobby, but it's up on top of the stadium, and there's windows that look out, and they have all this food and drinks and everything just spread out. So if you're in the luxury box, it's all just whatever you want, it's all part of the luxury box experience. And so my wife and I are walking through the buffet, and we're loading up our plates, and it's good food, and we're grabbing drinks, and there's desserts. Let's put some desserts on the plate. And we're wearing our Georgia gear, and we're like, just some of the only Georgia people in this group of like 1,000, high heeling Tennessee rich fans who are all just can't believe what they just saw. And we are just smacking down some food and enjoying the heck out of ourselves, and just go on to just have a great time talking smack the rest of the time. So, I mean, we tried to be polite, and, because we were invited guests, but and to their credit, all the fans up there pretty much absorbed. They had discussion about the game. Well, you guys are really doing it. This will be a fourth win in a row. But that was one of the truly great. There's a lot. Most of my best moments are probably actually in Sanford Stadium and different other experiences. But this is a top 10 moment as a Georgia fan for me. One of the great experiences. And of course, again, we had not yet even taken over the lead yet. I think at this point in the all-time series with Tennessee, in correcting the wrongs of the 9-game losing streak. But this was a big step in that direction, and clearly we had taken control of the series with Tennessee now after losing 9 straight, winning 4 in a row. Really felt great. And so it was a great drive up there. It was a great drive back. It was a lot of fun to watch, and it's probably the most fun I've ever had at an away game. I got a couple Auburn stories I'll tell somewhere where we get down closer to the Auburn game. A couple pretty good ones there too. But overall, this was a great time, and it was great, truly great to be a Georgia Bulldog on that day. So, okay, so this has been a long, deep run into history, and we've used up most of our time. I wanted to talk about a couple other things. I left out one of my points when I started talking about Aaron Murray's YouTube show where he broke down some of Stetson's. I got off topic. I forgot to point out that while he did, I guess the upshot of all that, I'll just say quickly, was he did point out several plays in which he thought Gunnar was a little hesitant, where there were some open reads downfield that he bypassed for the shorter passes, providing a little answer. We talked about, is he doing that intentionally? Are the coaches telling him to do that intentionally, or is he missing the reads? Murray pointed out that he's probably a little slow on his reads, that some of the passes that he's tried for, or maybe the plays were open early, but he didn't pull the trigger, and so he did have to go to the outside because that's what was available. So he may need to be working a little bit on moving a little faster through the progression, and trusting that he is ready to rip the ball to the guy who's open down over the middle. So that was some insight from Aaron Murray. But one of the things I will point out, or I thought was really interesting, even as Murray was breaking this down, and Murray also pointed out to a lot of good things he did. I mean, Murray wasn't just ripping him and saying, oh, he's no good. There was a lot of good things that he pointed out, but he pointed out some things that he needs to work on and things he saw, and I appreciated that, real quarterback perspective. But one of the plays he did highlight where a receiver had broken out open to the left, Gunnar looks that way, chooses not to take it because he's maybe worried the defensive back is going to undercut the guy even though he looks open. Back in the middle, Lawson Lucky is wide open in the middle, but he bypasses that, and he ends up tucking the ball and running. And this is what I think this is what Kirby likes, and I think this is what we can be happy about is, look, right now the offense may not be clicking with downfield passing as a well-oiled machine, but it is confidence inspiring a little bit that we don't take negative plays and we don't put ourselves always behind the sticks, because on this play, this was like a 1st and 10 play. He didn't choose the 2 throwing options that were available. He probably could have. The window closed, but a quarterback who's not Gunnar, having also not made those reads, might have also taken a sack or a no-gain play. And Gunnar was able to scramble out to the side and get somewhere between a 1 and 3 yard run. And on this drive, we'll go on to score on this drive. So ending up in 2nd and 8 or 2nd and 7 instead of 2nd and 15 or 2nd and 12 or even 2nd and 10 is a big deal. And that is something Gunnar brings to the table, even when he maybe doesn't make the read downfield that we might want him to see. So, okay, in our next episode, we're going to start breaking down some of the key components of the matchups and start getting into what do we think is going to happen? What have we seen so far and what's going to happen? We've seen a decline in our defense the last couple of years, especially on the run defense, and we're going to talk about some of those numbers, and we're going to talk about what we've seen so far and how we think it's going to hold up against Tennessee. We also got to look at, I think a perspective that kind of dawned on me is, look, our offense hasn't looked super exciting, but our defense has looked great so far. They're holding teams to an average of 200 yards and 6.5 points per game. So right now they're putting up numbers that are like the elite defenses of a few years ago. And Tennessee, as we talked about, has been putting up elite offensive numbers in the 2 games they've had so far. So we're going to talk about which one of these is more real, right? Because these are going to be some of the matchups that we're going to look at, and that's a key, right? Which we both played lesser competition, so which of these is more likely to hold up, or are they both going to hold up? We'll break it down, but that's kind of one of the things I think is an interesting perspective to specifically look at is, okay, our defense is playing like we wanted to see it play the last couple of years, and it hasn't. It's been early against not great competition. Tennessee's offense is looking like the potent offense that you are used to seeing them have under Josh Heupel. Again, early, not great competition. Which one of those things is going to hold up in the game when we go play on Saturday? Another idea I'm going to get into is I was looking back at our teams and under Kirby Smart a little bit, and I've come to the conclusion that I think this team is reminding me a lot of the 2019 team. And so we're going to dig into that comparison a little bit and talk about why I think that's true. And this is, probably not a bad thing. By the way, the 2019 team won the SEC East, went on to represent the East in the SEC championship game, and got absolutely mauled 38-10 by LSU in that game. That was the Joe Burrow and all the great player team. And like we talked about already, that LSU team was a team just like the Alabama and Georgia national championship teams of the last 5, 6, 8, 10 years. That was a team that was just loaded with talent. That was a juggernaut. And yes, Georgia was a good team, but that was a juggernaut. And I'll go ahead and just tell you, again, I don't think there's any juggernauts out there. So I don't, when I say that we might compare favorably to the 2019 team, and we'll break that down a little bit more, why, teasing that out for tomorrow and Friday, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. That team made it to the SEC championship, and had it won the SEC championship, and it could have. I mean, we went in 11-1, so we certainly thought we had a chance. LSU looked great, but we had no idea until LSU, punished us and then won the national championship game against Clemson. We, after making it in the playoff, we had no idea, that they were as good as they turned out to be. But they proved it by beating us, stomping through the playoff, beating Clemson for the national championship. And so looking back, we realized, okay, look at all these pros, look at all these players. That was a juggernaut team. Again, I don't think there's a juggernaut team that we're going to run into out there. So I don't think it's bad if we compare to the 2019 team. I think that could be a comparison we can live with, because that team goes 11-1 and goes to the SEC championship. And in this era, that would be more than enough to make you a contender in the playoff series. In that era, there was only a 4-team playoff, and losing the SEC championship game, as has happened to us more than once now, is essentially an elimination game or a pre-playoff game. Well, this year that's not the case. So the 12-team playoff has changed that. So we'll dig in that a little bit more. Also, I want to throw out another piece of history I did not mention in my notes about the Tennessee matchup. It's worth noting in this 8-game winning streak that we're on, it has not been particularly competitive. Let me just throw a little more dirt on Tennessee. The average score of the 8 wins that Georgia has had in a row so far is 38-13 over these last 8 games. So I also particularly enjoy the fact that we're not just eking out a few wins here and there. In fact, last year's 31-17 win is probably, I think, the closest game in the matchup so far. Just looking back at it, I think, we had 38-10. Well, no, the 2022 game was 27-13. That was also a little closer. But that game, you might remember, turned into a rainstorm in the second half. We were up 27-3 or 6 or something like 7. So, I mean, we were up significant in that game and kind of just ran the clock out. So we probably could have made that a bigger beatdown. The other games were 41-17, 44-21, 43-14, 38-12, 41-0. So those are the scores of the 8-game losing streak that Tennessee has against us. So one could say they're trending in the right direction. The last couple of years, it's definitely been closer than the average, 38-13, especially last year. But, we'll see how that goes. Also, it's worth noting that we hold the all-time in this series. We are 15-1 or 15-11 with a tie at home, and we are 14-12 with a tie on the road. So we also actually own the winning record both in Neyland Stadium and Sanford Stadium. So that's fun too. All right, this has been a long, deep dive into history, but I hope it really gets you fired up. We will break down the game, and we still got tomorrow and Saturday to do that and get to our predictions. And there's just so much you can go over. I think, offensive line, defensive line, who's going to do what. And again, at this early in the season, it's all rampant speculation. We're really not going to know a lot until and I've been listening to some of the other podcasters and other Georgia people and other national people. And, they say what they think is going to happen, but then they always qualify it and say, but, we don't know. And that's really it, right? We don't know. No matter what we come up with, we are purely speculating because it's just too early in the season to have a good idea. And even when you think like think about the 2004 season I was talking about. You're the defending SEC champion. You finished number 3. You just missed in the national championship in 2002. You come back in 2003 and you beat defending national champion Nick Saban coached LSU team at home 45-16, and you're undefeated and you're ranked number 3 again. You think you're on your way, and then an inferior Tennessee team comes to town and you lose, and then you're never back in the national title discussion again. So, even when you think you know what you don't know. That's college football, right? So, nonetheless, that's why we're spending the time here, because what we're doing is we're getting lathered up for the game, and we're trying to remember, you've won 8 in a row, and you may think that that's just something that we do all the time now. That hasn't always been the case. We still owe Tennessee, so we don't need to slack off. We need to come full-throated and hearty as fans, ready to just be rabidly excited about another win in Neyland Stadium, even if it's a 1-point eke-it-out win, because it could be the difference between a great season and a special season. So, well, I'll leave you to ponder that. We'll be back tomorrow. I still plan to get the game list out as a written article I talked about, and hopefully I can get that done sometime today. Who are the contenders and what are the games out there we're still keeping track of. This week there's actually a number of good games that might actually matter. I think 3 or 4. I think 4 of my 34 were playing this week after 4 of my 31 games that might matter in the national championship race, I think, are this week after there being 0 last week. So we also need to talk about that. But hopefully I'll get that published as a list. So I hope you have a great Thursday afternoon. Can't wait to get back with you again on Friday. Feel free to dig into feel free, please, to remind people, share the Daily Dawg podcast with other Dawg fans, other college football fans out there, maybe even some Tennessee fans. And go Dogs.